Citing epic poetry is almost exactly the same as citing any other kind of poetry. Citing epic poetry is almost exactly the same as citing any other kind of poetry. If it's a single line, you encase your selection in quotation marks, and you include a citation in parentheses at the end that begins with the author's last name. As always, when you are making a parenthetical citation, you want to be as specific and accurate as possible. Because epic poems are divided into subsections, you should indicate the section from which you took the quote. These sections are called any number of things, such as book, canto, part, etc. In the Odyssey, obviously, we use books. Additionally, you would indicate the line number. In Mandelbaum's translation, we don't have line numbers, so we will use page numbers instead. Simply substitute page number for line number in the citation. Use Arabic numerals, even if the original uses Roman numerals. You separate the two bits of information with a period between them and no spaces. If you use more than one verse or line, you encase in quotation marks as usual. Additionally, you must indicate the end of each line with a slash with a space on either side of it. Finally, you cite just as we discussed above. So if I were to quote the first two lines of the Odyssey, it would look like this. Muse, tell me of the man of many wiles. Now that's the end of the first line, so I'm going to indicate that with a space, a slash, and a space. And then I'm going to continue typing. If the next line were capitalized, I would capitalize it. But since Mandelbaum doesn't capitalize, then I don't. The man who wandered many paths of exile. And that's all I'm going to be quoting for now. So I'm going to end with the quotation marks and then include my citation. And of course beginning with the author's last name, Homer, in this case his only name. Then a space, and then using Arabic numerals I indicate the division. And this is a book, and it's book 1, so I include a 1. Then a period, and then if we had line numbers, we would do the line numbers in Arabic numerals. 1-2, this is lines 1 and 2. Now it's easy enough to count from the first two lines of the poem, but if you're pulling something from the middle of the poem, it's unreasonable to expect you to count every single line from the beginning. So instead we use just page numbers. And in this case, you would think it's page 1. It's in fact page 3. Then we're going to end parentheses, and then of course end our sentence with a period. This citation tells your reader that I pulled the quote from book 1 on page 3. Now, if your quotation is more than 3 lines of verse, it's going to need to be a block quote. Again, introduce a block quote with a colon. Indent an additional inch from the left margins for a total of 2 from the edge of your paper. Double space as usual with each verse on its own line, including all internal punctuation and the end punctuation. Maintain it. You omit the quotation marks, and of course you include a parenthetical reference on the same line as the final verse with no punctuation after the parentheses. If your quotation covers more than one page, you use both page numbers with a dash between them. So, if I were to say something, my citation said 2 period 45 to 46, that would tell the reader that the quote was from book 2 on pages 45 and 46. Let's look at an example. So I'm going to have a lead-in sentence, which I didn't do on the earlier one, but hopefully you're in that habit. Okay. The poem introduces readers to the exploits of the hero. And I'm going to introduce the quote with a colon. Now I'm going to type the quote, and what I could do is laboriously tab over twice for each line, but that can get messy, and so I'm going to show you a trick once I get this whole quote in here. And through the magic of word processing. There it is. So I've got my whole quote in here, and I'm going to highlight the whole thing, and then I'm just going to grab one of these little blocks right here and slide this over to 1 inch, and then everything. If I needed to type any additional lines, I would be able to just keep going as it is. So everything's exactly where it needs to be. So at the end of my quote, I've got a period at the end of the quote. I didn't include it here, so just so I could show you that it belongs. So ordinarily we would get rid of that period. We would stick it on the other side of the parentheses, but because this is a block quote, we keep it in. We're going to have a space, and let's pretend this is not my first quote. So in parentheses, I would simply have the page number, or excuse me, the division of the work, book 1, with a period, and then the page number on which I found the work, which is page 3 still, and parentheses. I do not include a period here, so essentially my block quote is done. I would hit enter, and then I'd have to move this back. And then I would continue typing as usual with my analysis. And of course in your paper this would be double spaced, but in order to let you see it, I had to keep it all here. Okay. Now one final note about epic poetry. When you make a reference to a division of a work in the text of your paper, those divisions are never in quotation marks, or italicized, or capitalized. Additionally, the division of the work is indicated with Arabic numerals, even though you are used to spelling out numbers of 2 or fewer words. Let's look at an example. So if my line were in book 3 of the epic, 16 suitors pester Penelope. Nice alliteration there. So ordinarily, we're just kind of trained to capitalize these sorts of things, but in fact you do not. We're also trained to spell out words, numbers, and if you can do it in 3 words or fewer, then 2 words or fewer, then you typically would spell it out, but not when we're doing the divisions of a piece of work. And alternatively, we'd write when Odysseus returns home, he learns that 108 suitors are pestering Penelope. Whoops. Okay, so you see that here we would use the numbers here, but we would use the spelled out word here, because this can be done in 1 or 2 words, and this cannot. But divisions of the work are always just rendered in numerals.